Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. I am happy to be here with Adam Hoeksema of ProjectionHub based out of Indiana. And today we are going to be talking about a topic that is going to or possibly is affecting many of you right now with the changes in the reimbursement systems that are going on, and how I have recognized that many of you all are going to have to restructure your business from a broker model, Medicaid facility contract model. Once some of these changes start to trickle into the healthcare system. And so my goal today was to bring Adam on so that he can help us to get you prepared for funding in the case that you have a cash flow crunch. And we can explain what that's about, how to prepare, get all of that going. And I want to just do a quick plug that got me started on my journey. I was doing some financial projections and having to create financial projections for my students. And I had to get some resource books. And one of the books that I found was Entrepreneur. I hope you can see it. Fund Your Business, Smart Strategies to Secure Financing. And this book has been so God sent. It has a lot of information that you can read on. And if you implement these strategies that are in the book, I really think that it will help you to build your business. So without any more, I want to say thank you. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm sure that in your experience that you have seen or worked with non-emergency medical transportation businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like from your aspect in the funding area?
Yeah, so, I guess a little bit of my background. So I spent 12 years as an SBA lender myself. And so an organization called Bankable here in Indiana. And we would make loans to businesses that were not yet bankable at a traditional bank. And so a lot of that was, startups and some NEMT businesses within that. And then a few years ago, I started ProjectionHub as a side hustle while I was still a lender, because a lot of our clients, we would ask them for projections, and you probably will understand this, that they kind of get this deer in the headlights look and like, what do I do? How do I do that? And so I started ProjectionHub to try to help make that process easier for clients. And that was a side hustle for a long period of time. Eventually stepped out of my role as a lender, and a few years ago, kind of full time into ProjectionHub. And so, what we do is help folks with projections and business plans, and then walking through the SBA process is a lot of the work that we do. And some of that has included clients that are starting non-emergency medical transportation businesses. So I'm aware. We've worked with some clients to see, like, man, this is not an easy business. So it's not an easy business. And so I, from that perspective, have some understanding.
That's right. Well, thank you for that. So when you've been working with these businesses, the businesses that you worked with in non-emergency medical transportation, like you said, they reached out to you, asking you for assistance. Because it is a deer in the headlights moment when someone asks you for financial projections. It's terrifying. What have you found as far as those clients on being funding ready or bankable?
Yeah. I mean, the way I think about, let's say for a startup or an early stage business, there's a few different things that are going to be important, the way that a lender looks at it. So you can kind of think about this as like a pre-qualification for a mortgage. What I see a lot of people do is they build a plan. They have this grand plan for, $1 million startup. They're going to start with, 10 vehicles or what, And then they go to the lender with this plan that they spent months and months on, and the lender's like, yeah, we would never do that. And so kind of in the same way, if I was, going to go shop for a house, I'd probably go to the lender first and say, here's my personal financial information. What do you think I might be able to afford? And so in the same way, from a lender perspective on an SBA loan, I would suggest talking to a lender early, and they're going to look at what do you have available for a down payment that typically are going to require at least 10% as a down payment. But that's kind of the bare minimum. So for a startup in an industry that's tough, they're probably going to say, well, it'd be great if you could do 20% or 25% is what I've been seeing lately. And so, that's kind of the first big thing is like, how much cash do you have available to put into this? If you've got, let's call it $25,000 available, that probably means your kind of maximum project size is like 100,000, right? So there's your 25% is your cash available, and then you've got your $75,000 loan. So that's piece one, the down payment. I think that sets like what's realistic for you to be able to borrow. Step two, credit score. If do you have a better than 650 credit score? That's usually what I say, kind of 650 or above for SBA. And then the third thing I would, lenders are going to look at is industry experience. So, in this case, I think if you just said, well, I've been a driver, that may not be what they're looking, that's okay. That's part of it, but there's a lot more to this business than that. And so I think understanding what you're being able to back up your experience, industry related experience too. So those are going to be kind of like first three core things. And if you can't pass that, then the projections or like the best projections, the best business plan is like, doesn't really matter if you don't have a down payment, don't have a decent credit score, and don't have some experience.
That's right. So that I love it. There's a lot in there to digest. So one of the first thing is I love that, hearing it called a project with all these books that I've been reading, and is understanding that, that when individuals as entrepreneurs start a business, that it is a project. It should not be looked at, you just work on it once and it's done. It's constantly growing and changing. And then to hit on your point, yes, doing your homework on your bank. That's one of the things that we work on a lot with my students is finding out, is your bank lender small business friendly? And then understanding that, how the banking system works and having those scores, like you mentioned, that is so important. The banks aren't going to lend to you if you don't have a good score. And then what we've been doing, with my program is that as far as experience, one of the things that we've come in on is doing it as a healthcare service business. So we're using more of the traditional extension of healthcare, even though it's still passenger transportation, it's extended of care. So we've got nurses and doctors and, NPs, they're now starting their transportation business. And so it's working better because it's easier for them to be able to understand that financial piece of it, that you have to have that experience. You can't just go in there and say, oh, well, I've been doing this for a while and now I want to start a business and give me your $100,000. It just doesn't work.
So, yeah, are you saying that you've been seeing in the market folks that are already operating some sort of, healthcare related business are kind of starting this an NEMT business as like an add-on to what they're already doing?
So I have a couple in Virginia. She's a physician and he's an educator. So the goal is to be able to kind of have an offshoot of each other. But more what I do is if you're a nurse and you're ready to leave the bedside, that is your experience, because
Sure.
transportation is an extension of healthcare.
Yeah.
So we're able to just, adjust the business plan to adapt to what they're actually doing as far as providing a service-based business rather than just a transportation business, which is stop and go. So
Yeah.
we're getting these business plans through and haven't had too much issues with funding from that standpoint. But, one of the things, and this is not on the question list, is that I've been seeing is like these really, really high interest rates. Um, I know that as from our previous podcast workshop that we did, you had talked about that, the interest rates would be higher for this type of business, but we're seeing like 11%, 12%. I mean, is that standard?
Yeah. Yeah. That now rates have started to come down a little bit, but so that should help. If it's a SBA 7A loan or SBA Community Advantage loan, then they do have some limits on how high of interest rate they can charge or how much of a spread. So it's all tied to the prime rate plus a spread. So, but yeah, when at least when interest rates were kind of at their highest, within, last 12 or 18 months ago, yeah, the rates could be in the 12% range. And so they've been starting to come down a little bit, but yeah. And on top of that too, with SBA, they do have some closing costs. There's going to be some closing costs with the SBA guarantee fee. It's not cheap. It's not cheap,
No.
which honestly, one of the things that I've looked at with startups and for deals that are not fully collateralized, a lot of times the way I'm seeing these deals get done is when the client has some equity in their home, and so okay, well, I could pledge the equity in my home to help collateralize and get this SBA loan done, but then you need to start asking yourself, well, if you're pledging the house anyway and you've got equity in the home, should you just do a home equity line of credit, or is there some
Yep.
other
Yep.
maybe cheaper? Or even if it's not cheaper, I mean, sometimes I have clients that are like, I want to do SBA, and I'm like, well, you're gonna have to pledge your house probably, and if you're going SBA, you also have to go through all these other hoops like business plan and projections and all this other stuff that if you just said, I'm just going to do a home equity line of credit, they're not going to ask you for your business plan, So SBA is not always the right solution for folks.
Yeah, I've realized that because a lot of my clients are in the financing phase or just finished the financing, and I of course, had to learn so much, but that you have equipment loans, and that's the trap. That right there is the trap. And I need to do a whole video on that's the trap. Is just get an equipment based loan. Now you don't have any capital. And so they end up, messing up their credit because they got this equipment loan. They didn't get any capital. And so they can't even do the second loan. But fortunately for my clients, that's not the case. I've had clients, like you said, they were like turned down the SBA loan. It was too expensive. Even the third party loans that I've gone to that I've sent my clients to, you know, even though the loan 11%, 12%, and I'm like, they're like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, I wouldn't either. Don't do it. And then we'll go to the bank again with that banking relationship. And they'll say, okay, well, we can do a line of credit. And I have one client out of Maryland who they gave them the credit line, and then they only have to pay it back when they use it on that portion. So that was fantastic. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, if you can do a line of credit is nice. Part of the challenge that I've been seeing and working with clients, and this is just kind of across any industry, and this is really most of my career was in SBA micro lending and community advantage, which is those smaller loans. So we were the ones where the bank had a deal and it was like, oh, this is too small for us to worry about, or we're too busy with they're chasing the $500,000, the $1 million deals. And so when you come to them with a, $100,000 request, which is very meaningful and life-changing for you, it's like, oh, I don't have time for this, And so to get them to be excited, get a lender that's really going to focus on a deal. That's so one piece of advice I would say is, if you're going to like a traditional bank, just know that if you're on the smaller side, like I consider small, or a lot of these lenders consider small, like under 350,000. So if you're asking for less than 350, you're probably considered small, and probably going to be hard to get a lender who really has a lot of experience in SBA to work with you. So that a trick there is to try to work with a CDFI or SBA micro lender, where at a SBA micro lender like the one I worked at, most of our loans were less than $50,000. So if we had $100,000 request, we're like, hey, this is a big one. We're excited about this one, and we, so that's just something to keep in mind.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is so great. Yeah, we talk about that all the time. It's like some of the larger banks, that are well known, I won't mention them, but they don't want to be bothered with you. I mean, not that they, but they want, like you said, the larger loans. So it's better to go to like your community banks, that's what they're there for, to help fund the community. So I appreciate that. So I guess I would like to ask you, for this type of business, and because I know that a lot of them have never done a set of financial projections. I never really did a set of financial projections until I had to create them. But what documentation should they be prepared to show a lender when they get their business plan done and things like that?
Yeah, so I'll speak very specifically. If it's SBA related, they will ask for 2 years of projections, or maybe it's 3. I guess maybe it's actually 3 years. I should know, but all of our templates are always 5 years, so that's why I just always say I just do 5. But it may be, I think it's 3 years, and the first like 18 months needs to be monthly, and so that's what you would need to do, and you need to do that. I usually say income statement, cash flow statement, and balance sheet projections are kind of the gold standard if you can do all of those. Yeah, but at the very least, cash flow projections is what you're going to need. And I would say, and then there's the written assumptions. So that's another key piece that SBA will require is they want written assumptions. So you need to be able to write out how you got at these numbers. So a lot of times what we would see when we get projections from clients when they were applying, you just see a number for revenue. It would just say, $30,000. It's like, and then next month, $35,000. And then the next month, $40,000. And it would just go up in some incremental way. And you're like, how, why, what's driving this? And so, if you're not, the way I like to build projections is kind of the show your work. Like if you remember in school, the math teacher said, like, show your work, so you have the sections that are like, here's how I got to my revenue. Here's how many trips I did. Here's my rate per trip, that sort of thing, versus just giving me a number, because the lender is just going to think you pulled it out of thin air, and usually you did. So that, I think that's if you have a method to your madness of how you came up with your numbers, like you need to write those down in as great a detail as you can. The more detail, the better. I think that's what would impress. You got to remember that there's somewhere in the process, there's an underwriter, there's a loan committee member that's an accountant somewhere probably. And that accountant wants to know, how did you come up with this? So be detailed, you'll impress them.
That is so awesome. Those are such good gems, because, doing these financial projections, and I'm like, I have to learn accounting, like a basic understanding of accounting. And that was pretty hard for me to grasp, because I'm not really a numbers person. So understanding the differences between credit and debits and income statements and balance statements, that was something that really got me confused. So I'll ask you, can you give us an elementary explanation of what those documents are so they can kind of grasp that?
Yeah. So most of the time, I think what people think of when they think of a set of projections are probably thinking of what I would consider a cash flow statement. So it's like cash flow would just be what's all the cash that's coming in minus all the cash that's going out. But then in accounting, there's a difference between the cash flow statement and the income statement. So as an example, in this type of business, you have equipment. If you own that equipment, if you own those vehicles, there's going to be depreciation. Those vehicles will depreciate. That is counted as an expense on your income statement, but it's not. Depreciation expense is not a cash expense. Like if you've paid for the vehicle up front and then it depreciates over time. So there's an example of a key difference between what the income statement will show, because it'll show depreciation expense, but the cash flow statement won't show depreciation. And then the balance sheet, the way you think about cash flow and income statement is that's going to be over a period of time, whereas a balance sheet is a particular point in time. How much do you owe other people? What do they owe you? And what assets do you have? What cash and equipment do you have at a snapshot? And in theory, the way it should work is that if you do your accounting, your balance sheet should stay balanced, and you make a change to the income statement, it all flows through. But getting that to work in a projection model is, I'm sure like, darn, the balance sheet doesn't balance. That's the thing that
is broken.
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
Oh, that is, I'm telling you, it's like finding the balance to where it makes sense. That was very, like I said, I told you before, it was a little traumatizing, but
yeah,
I did make it through it and got it done. I don't think I could ever do it again. So I hope my model never breaks.
yeah.
That's awesome. So, can you tell me what some of the common mistakes that you find that I know you touched on some at the beginning where you said, not taking a look really at the lenders that are in your area, but what maybe are some common mistakes that you see most often that entrepreneurs, not even NEMT, but just entrepreneurs make in general when getting ready to get funded?
Yeah, I think I would recommend talking to a lender sooner than later. I really, so we've kind of made a transition in our business over the last year or so. So usually the way we used to do things is people would think, hey, I need projections. I'm trying to, maybe I talk to a lender, or we wouldn't really ask, why do you need the projections per se? We'd just say, if you want projections, we can help you with that. And we wouldn't ask all these questions about how are you getting the funding? What is your plan for the funding? And what would end up happening is, along the way, somewhere in the process of doing the projections, we'd realize, oh boy, I don't think you're ever going to qualify for this. And so what I have tried to recommend to clients, and it's cost us sales that we would have probably otherwise had, but we tell clients, hey, before you spend money or time or effort building out projections, let's make sure that you have a chance at being pre-qualified. Like, do you have the down payment? What's a credit score? If you said, yeah, I've got $5,000 available to put in the business, well, then we know we shouldn't build a whole business plan and projection plan around a $300,000 loan request. Not going to happen. So that's I think the most common mistake is just waiting too long to get that kind of lender feedback. And so I would recommend doing that on the front end. Have a lender, here's my situation. Here's what I want to do. What do you think? Do you think there's a path here? Look at my financial situation. Do you think there's a path? And how would you structure this deal? Those are the projections I love working on, when it's like there's already a lender involved saying, here's how we think we can get this done. And then we build the projections and the business plan all around that structure. Otherwise, we end up building something that that first light of day it gets against the, lender or investor, and they're like, no, we're not going to do that.
I know exactly what you mean, because, I was trying so hard to, get my projections to make sense. And when I finally said, okay, how would we do this? And just went basically line by line on what it is I would do and does it make sense in the workflow, then it made everything just kind of flow better. And even with my clients, I have to tell them, keep your credit clean, keep everything in alignment, because, or if you've got some spots to work on, then you don't have to rush the business, just wait, and definitely at least have 20% down, because even if you don't have to use that 20% down, you still have you have that now as working capital, so you can use that. And, one of the things that I see in this industry a lot is that people underestimate what it actually costs to start and operate this business. And, I'm glad that I'm generally the one who gets those consultation calls and can tell them, hey, this is not going to work for you, because you have to have the resources, the financial resources. You can get them, it's just because, I have to, unless you've got $100,000 or so sitting in the bank somewhere already, you're going to need funding at some point.
Yeah.
It's going to be needed.
Yeah. And, actually, I as you were talking, I thought of NEMT specific situation that I think, I don't know if it was a mistake or not, but just something that I've had a client going through. And so this client, I think basically what they did is they got equipment, like vehicle financing, and then they self-funded the working capital. And their hope was, hey, I'll be able to get an SBA loan later. And so the problem is that once you start, then you have results, then you have financial results. And so once you start, then the lender is going to say, okay, well, show me how you're doing. Show me your financial results. And well, in this particular case, it was like, well, we're not making any money yet. We're on the right trajectory, but we're not profitable yet. Okay, well, if you're not profitable, not going to qualify for an SBA loan, because how are you going to pay the loan? You have no cash flow from the business to be able to pay the loan, and you got to be able to show that. So in some ways, it's easier to get approved for a loan when it's all just projection based. But once you have real results, it's harder. And then the other thing I would say, just to be aware, usually a lender won't accept just your internally prepared, like they're going to want to wait for a tax return. So like if it's January now, like if you start now and then you think, hey, maybe if I'm operating for 6 months or something, then I can try to get additional funding to grow. Probably what a lender is going to say is, well, we want to see your tax return. Well, you're not going to have your first tax return. If you start today, you're not going to receive that until sometime in April of 2027. So you're a long way off. And then even then, it's still, lenders like to make up reasons to say no. So, if it's like, well, this is a point in time, we like to see a trend. So we want to see a couple of years and see if you're trending in the right direction is, often. Now, if that first year was really profitable, they'll find a way to say yes. But if it was close, then that's what you'll probably hear is, well, let's see how next year goes. You do keep it up, but let's see how next year goes. So just something to be aware of. Once you start, it opens you up to all these other questions from a lender perspective.
That's a good thing to know, because, and that's one of my fears, is that a lot of the providers right now who did exactly that, went out and got that equipment loan only and thought, okay, well, I'll just self-fund it. But because you're self-funding, you miss out on marketing opportunities and advertisement because you're either don't have the money to do them or you don't want to spend the money on that. So when you are already like holding yourself back from actually the breakthrough because you don't have the financial resources. So I have found so many individuals are in that spot right now. And so I'm just like, oh my goodness, that, they,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing to think about if you're in that spot, the way a lender is going to look at an existing business then is, they're going to look at your historical tax return performance, and based on your profit, they're going to calculate how much could you cash flow a loan. So if you are applying for a loan where you're going to have, $12,000, let's say it's $1,000 a month payment. So $12,000 of payments for the year. The lender's going to want you to show a profit or a cash flow of, usually it's like 1.25 times your debt service.
yes,
So
yes,
if,
yeah.
I'm not going to do the public math, but you can do 1.25 times 12,000, whatever that is. That's the kind of profit you need to be able to show to be able to support a loan of that amount. So when a lot of times what I'll see is businesses get started, they're not profitable yet. And then they say, I need a loan to help me get to the point where I could be profitable. It's going to be tough. You're going to have a tough time with that, at least with SBA, the way the lenders are going to look at those deals.
Yeah, it's so good that you say that because I think that a lot of individuals, myself too, when I started, is we look at it backwards. We think that the banks are there to give us a loan when we need it, but that's not it. They want to give you the money when you don't.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once I discovered that, it was like, oh, it's a whole different way of thinking about it. So if they offer me the money, I'm gonna go ahead and use it and invest it into my business for the marketing, the advertisement, and then I get it back and I'm able to pay it back.
Yeah.
Such a different process.
Yeah. It's so true.
So let's see. Let me see. I think you've talked about a lot of this. Oh, yeah, let me ask this. So, say for instance, and I've got to get my books in order. I should have had them in order in December, but we had a lot go on. So, I'm going to give myself
Yeah.
grace. But for those of us that have those messy financials, and what is the fastest path for us to clean them up and not feel overwhelmed?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard, I feel like the first 12 years of my career in that SBA micro lending, I was always working with clients who had messy financials, and it makes some sense because when you're just getting started, you don't have a lot of margin, you don't have a lot of profit, and so hiring outside accountant to do monthly bookkeeping, it may just be an expense. You don't have the scale yet to be able to cover that. And so you need to like get to a certain scale to be able to afford to do that. But it's hard to get to that scale if you have messy books. So I've seen, so many clients in that kind of trap. I think, I would say for as long as you can in those early days, doing the spreadsheet, you've got your own spreadsheet and you're taking your bank statements and doing the best you can to categorize them each month and just doing it in a spreadsheet for as long as possible. I think that's probably the way to go. Eventually you're going to need to get it into a system like QuickBooks or something, some accounting software. And in my opinion, I would probably hire somebody to, like, you've got enough stuff to learn about the business probably, that also trying to learn how to do the bookkeeping correctly It's just, I don't know. I can count just a few people who I feel like were operating their business. They weren't really an accountant by trade or anything, and they were doing a really good, accurate job of their bookkeeping. The challenge is if you screw your bookkeeping up, and then you're going to a lender, and you submit financials that look wrong, look messy, look like this can't be right. Like a negative liability, which shouldn't be possible, or something screwed up. It throws everything into question. If there's one mistake in your financial statements, the lender's going to pick that right out and say, well, then what else is a mistake?
That's right.
I must assume that all of this is just not accurate. And it could just be, I got pretty good about like picking out a mistake and say, oh, I bet I know what they did. They probably swapped their debits and credits on one. It could just be one journal entry. Who knows? But most of the lenders on the loan committee were like, nope, we can't trust it. We can't rely on these. So how can we make a lending decision if we don't know if this is reasonable? So, and I think it's easier to make mistakes in a QuickBooks software than it would just be if you like just take your bank statements and put it in a spreadsheet line by line. You're more likely to probably do that accurately because you know what's an expense or revenue than trying to figure out the QuickBooks software.
Yeah. That's also point on, because even me this year, I said, I've got to hire a bookkeeper. And it's one of those expenses that I pay for. I pay for an accounting software, Xero, every month. But learning this, it's like, okay, it's so important that you expense things correctly. And there's certain things that, I've paid for, I'm not even sure how to expense it,
Yeah.
So it's, even though I'm paying for that software, I'm really just going to have to stop paying for it and just go ahead and give it over to a bookkeeper and then to an accountant to kind of get those things in order. Because again, you can't scale if you don't know what your numbers are. You just can't.
Yeah. It is it's a hard place to be. So there's some question about, in a business like this, or I've got another client I've been meeting with that's in a dump truck business. And it was like, they're trying to figure out, should I start with one vehicle, two vehicles, three vehicles? And, with each, the loan amount goes up significantly. You're taking on more risk, but they're also looking at it like, well, with just one dump truck and this person was not going to be the driver, they were just going to be the manager, there just wasn't enough margin with just one truck to be able to like actually earn a living or pay for business expenses. So it's like you need to hit a certain scale. And I can imagine it would be the same here, especially if you're not the driver, that you need to reach a certain scale to even have a chance at profitability. So
That's good. Yeah, so that's exactly, and when I built out my projections, that's one of the things that I had to put in is, when does it look right to get that second and that third vehicle, and then on the projection, I built in the section where it's the driver, you pay your driver and your admin. Well, if you're the driver and the admin, that's, you just pay yourself payroll.
Yeah.
So I've had the opportunity to learn those things, but I think that individuals, they have to, again, in this industry, you have to sit down with someone and someone who understands financials and what the banks are looking for before you just jump in and give them something. Because I'm guilty. I was trying to learn my financial projections, and I told one of my students, this is a personal story, but I told one of my students, I said, let them know that I am working on these, that these are not finals. And it was an SBDC a SBDC counselor. And when I tell you, she ripped me, and I was so offended. I was so offended. And I gave her a call and I let her know how offended I was because I was like, I get it. I get it. I get it. And I took her feedback. I did. I took her feedback and I applied it. And that's why my financial projection template that I gave you looks the way it does. Because, she ripped me a new one. But and so it's like I now understand exactly what you mean when you say that a lender can be like, no, the one little thing wrong and we're not even going to take a look at it because they are that serious about it.
Yeah, and I think I've had my share of run-ins with SBDC advisors, so you're not alone. And I would say there's a big difference. I mean, not every SBDC advisor knows what they're talking about necessarily. So, no offense to you SBDC advisors out there, but uh, you know, I've had situations where advisors have ripped apart a set of projections, and and then we're going back and forth on the projections, and I have to tell the client, like, have you talked to a lender yet? Have you talked to a lender yet? Because again, we can tinker with these projections all day long, but probably what's really going to matter to the lender is like, what's your credit score? What's your outside income? How are you going to pay this loan back when everything goes to crap? If this business doesn't make any money, how are you going to pay the loan back? That's what's really probably going to, win you the deal at the end of the day. And so I think a lot of times I find, when SBDC advisors get involved, that I'm sometimes thinking, oh no, we're gonna spend a month and a half tinkering with these numbers, and it really won't matter. It may not matter what they say because you don't have these other things in line. So talk to the lender sooner. But
I'm so, like, I feel like God is really helping me right now because that's exactly how I felt. I was like, because I always used to send my clients to SBDC for, that free help, support within the community. But I have just found that number one, the innovation has went out the window. They're like, oh, it's a transportation business. Nobody's going to do that. And I'm like, did you read the plan? Did you read the business plan? Did you look at the financial projections? And so I have to tell my clients a lot of times, it's like, just ask them who the community lenders are in your area so we don't waste a whole lot of time. That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that I'm not the only one who's experienced a couple of those type of situations.
Yeah. I'll make a little more of an enemy from any SBDC advisors out there, but usually what I find is if they happen to like also work for a university, that's usually the bad sign. It's like, we're working with academics here. And they really like the academic exercise of playing with these things, and they may just play with them forever. And it's like, at some point you got to get out there and talk to the lender.
Yes, I'm so glad. I mean, and I do want to say, Deb, and I know you've had also that I've had some wonderful experiences.
Yes.
And again, the reason why my financial projections look the way that they do now is because we have an SBDC counselor in Texas that we're working with. And I showed, after I got all these corrections from getting ripped apart, I asked her, hey, can you take a look at these? And she was like, oh, these are great. And she was like, I just put in this because that doesn't make sense. And this doesn't make sense, but, clean that up. So I made those corrections. And when you were like, hey, can I see that? I was like, yeah, sure. So, but yeah, it can definitely be intimidating. But the biggest part of that is just asking the bank what they want. That's like easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, Adam, this has been great. I'm just going to do some shout outs here because I could talk all day long now that I actually like financial projections. I could talk all day long. But hi, Wesley, if you're still here, thank you from Virginia. Glad to be here. I'm glad you're here. Tiffany, hey girl, how you doing? Look, I still want to get you in a program. I really do. Come on, get call Bryce back up and get in a program, girl. And then we have, is it Robbie Giglio? Okay. Good evening from Louisiana. Good evening to, and for any Adam, anything that you would like to say before we leave? Any last um, advice that you would like to give the community?
I think I can't say enough about going through your process of working on some projections probably before you dive in too far. Not because they need to be perfect, but to help you think through what scale do I need to be at to make this work. The projection should help you realize that, like, if this is how much I can make on each vehicle and whatnot, then you can kind of see, okay, I got to be at this point to be able to cover all my overhead and all of this, right? And if you don't do that, what I think I see clients get in that trap of is like they get started, they put themselves on the hook for this debt, and they're like, I got to get bigger, but now I can't borrow anymore. I'm in this no man's land, and so doing the financial analysis on the front end, I think, can be really helpful in just knowing what you're getting into. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Can I just say this one thing? Because when you said that, it just made me, because, doing when I'm doing those, and I have to tell my clients all the time too, is that, I spent a whole lot of time doing your financial projections. Like I really did. I did a lot of work. It was a lot of work to do those financial projections. You gotta do what the projections say to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you have a business plan and you don't do what's inside the business plan, or if you have an ad budget, but you use the ad budget for food and entertainment.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. All right. And then anything else you want to tell us? Because I want you to have the last word.
No, I don't think so. I appreciate being here, and hope it was helpful. And feel free. Anyone can feel free to reach out to me if they have questions. It's just adam@projectionhub.com. So happy to help.
Absolutely. I'm glad. Thank you for giving that information. And I will link Adam's information to the description box and to the comments section so that if you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact him. All right, y'all. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah. Thank you.